Welcome to the Upshot, multi-world disc golf podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, as always, Josh Mansfield. I'm in strange surroundings here. I'm in San Diego for the USA Ultimate Club National Championships. Josh, this is the worlds of Ultimate. Maybe the US DGC. I don't quite know what the analog is, but it's the big one.
So club nationals, this is because Ultimate doesn't really have like professional. Club is the closest thing to professional Ultimate, correct?
Complicated. Sort of? There are semi-professional leagues that are, players do get paid to play, and it is a high level of competition, but most would consider this still to be the pinnacle of actual competition, even though no one's getting any money from showing up to this.
Got it. Okay. So how many teams participate in this event?
48. 3 divisions.
Okay. And does this start off with pool play?
It does. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. That's every time I am on Ultimate Twitter because I find entertainment from Ultimate Twitter, even if I don't know everything that's said. So question then, who do I root for at Club Nationals this week? Because every time there's a big tournament, I always throw it up while I'm at work. I got to watch a little bit of
I love it.
Ultimate.
Yeah. Ultiworld.com/live. What kind of team do you want to root for?
I don't want to root for the favorite, but I want my team to have a chance to win.
Do you want to root for a team? I'll give you a team from each division.
Oh boy. Okay.
I mean, you could just choose a particular division if you want. But I would say in the women's division, there's a new team this year from Southern California. They're actually the number 2 seed, but a lot of people think that they, are just too young and inexperienced to be able to win. They're called Flipside, and they're going to be super fun to watch. Will they win? Probably not, but they have a chance. I think they have a chance.
Okay.
In the mixed division, I would say go with Hybrid. They've been close to the top, super athletic, and they're out of Michigan. And they have a huge game on day one that's free on YouTube that you can check out against Mixtape. The presumptive favorite, even though they're the number 5 seed. And then in the men's division, I would say, do you want a team that's crazy volatile and could totally blow up, but could also win the tournament?
Yes.
Okay, Machine. Chicago Machine is your choice.
I think you've told me to root for Machine in the past.
It's very possible. They choked badly last year, and so we'll see what they can do this year. They have a lot of talent.
Choking badly sounds, I have experience with my teams choking badly, so that feels right up my alley.
Their quarterback is a lot better than Russell Wilson.
Oh, man. Oh, it hurts. Yeah, okay.
Somehow the 49ers lost to the Broncos, and I have this horrendous lock screen for the rest of the season.
Look, some things in the universe are just designed to happen, and we find a way to get it done.
Brutal. All right, well, we're going to talk today about Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship, kind of wrap-up thoughts, emails from folks. Just want to let you know right now, we've got a bunch of emails about how to improve the format. Send us your thoughts. We're going to do a little segment sometime next week where we maybe go through some of these ideas and then rank them. So we're going to give our top 5 or something ideas for improving the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship format. And you know what? If you want to send in an email that says the current format is great and here's why, put that in there too. Upshot@ultiworld.com, and we will discuss. So we'll also later talk about the big money skins competition coming up starting tomorrow and at Eagles Crossing. So big money, 50 grand to the winner guaranteed. So 35,000 at the Pro Tour Championship. We're just going to throw a ton of money at a skins tournament that people maybe sort of care about. I'm not really sure what the whole vibe on this event is. It's a little weird, but we're going to discuss, and they have some very interesting media plans. But first, let's get to some emails. Josh, why don't you grab one out of the box?
Yeah, my favorite email of the entire group came during the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship. Comes from Chris. The subject line says, in-person spectating at Nevin. and the entire email was one word: bad. With a period. Like that is it. That was the email. I love the email. I love the simplicity of it, but I think it really reflects kind of the thoughts that we had going into that tournament. Even watching the spectators, the way that they were kind of corralled and funneled around during the tournament, it was very clear that those lines were not going to be as easy to spectate, which kind of, I think, is the inverse of when we think of Champions Cup and the work that has been done in order to clear out lines behind the fairway and create that spectating opportunities continues to need to be improved. But it was something that I think had, I mean, we knew that Champions Cup was going to be at WR Jackson well in advance, and so they had time to begin to prep that. That wasn't the case at Nevin, and given the density of the woods there, this was a concern we had going in, and it seems like it actually did come to fruition that spectating was not at the top tier level that Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship should be.
Yeah, and like this is just a trade-off choice. You know, you want a dense woods course, you're almost right now guaranteed to have a bad spectator setup. You know, and I heard some buzz that, you know, VIP ticket holders were, you know, that wasn't being checked enough. So people were coming into the VIP area and it was hard because you had a bunch of people all stacked up. So you're craning your neck to see, you know, I think ultimately that's a sort of a symptom of the fact that this was on such a wooded course. So the only real option is to choose a better course, or, you know, if you really like Nevin, which I think the course itself looked good on camera, was challenging, and, you know, was fair. I think they did a nice job of getting it ready for competition. And especially once the weather was a little nicer, I thought it was enjoyable to watch. Like once the good players were out on the course, like I was like, all right, here we go. But if you want to go back there, you're going to have to like take out a lot of trees in spots where you can like tuck spectators in so they can actually watch. I mean, like I said before, this just feels like the wrong event to emphasize like, let's have the toughest wooded course we can get, when it really feels like what we need to be thinking about is how do you make it the best spectator experience while also having a course challenging enough to deserve the, you know, Tour Championship spotlight.
Yeah. I think one thing that some people commented on is they felt like it was too random for a Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship. I think given the format, the randomness of woods golf actually feeds well into it. You don't want a course where there's little scoring separation or people are able, you know, and the way that they play the long open holes are just around, if you're a higher seed playing match play with those around you to make sure that you just score the same as them. That's not what you want out of this format. So that's something I actually appreciate about the choice to put the Pro Tour Championship on a wooded course, is that the randomness that it creates feeds into the model that they have chosen to prioritize for the Pro Tour Championship with the resetting scores every time. Feels more natural and a better fit for me than an idea of putting it somewhere like LVC.
Yeah, look, I'll be the first person to criticize a hole that is, you know, just like a bunch of trees and you kind of have to just throw and hope. You know, hole 16 at FDR, I'm looking at you. And the thing is, I don't feel like that was Nevin. You know, there were obvious spots where you needed to throw down the fairway. Now, it may have been difficult. And obviously, tree kicks are going to have some level of randomness always. But it's not like you were just like, I'm just going to blast it down there and hope I don't hit anything. And there are holes on tour like that. But, you know, I don't think the course was unfair in any sense. I just think that it wasn't designed to be a spectated course. It was designed to be for players first and foremost. And so, you know, I think it says a lot, right, that 18 was the first playoff hole. It's like everyone acknowledges, like, well, this is the hole where you can really see, so let's play it again.
Yeah. Yep. Next email comes from Nathan and makes a comment I think I wanted to highlight, because we talk a lot about Disc Golf Network, the improvement that they've made. We talk a lot about the commentary on the Disc Golf Network. You know, the live coverage is what we talk about because I think it's what we consider to be the future of coverage and what we prefer. But I still appreciate some emails about Jomez and some post-produce. So Nathan writes, did you notice during the final round of the DGPT Championship that Big Germ and Yuli were taking notes and measurements for their commentary? I've seen them before in other tournaments, and Yuli even caddied for Simon. I respect how seriously they take their job because it shows in their commentary. I think that's a great observation. The important part about post-produced is that you're not being fed information from people on the ground as you're going, as is in the case with live. And Charlie, you can maybe speak to this a little bit more than I can. But for them to go out and then do that work themselves, to take the measurements, to be on the course, even if they weren't playing as much, because they were eliminated in earlier rounds, it really allows them then to feed and talk about it as if it was happening live, which I think is an important part for that post-produced coverage, is that you need to feel like the commentators as well as yourself are watching it for the first time. And that was one of the problems, for example, with like Worlds coverage, is it felt like it was difficult with the Holy Shot to really buy that authenticity, because you knew that they knew what happened. It was something that we knew for a fact had happened, and they have to play it off as if they're seeing it for the first time, and that's really difficult to do for a shot of that magnitude. However, I think having that information readily available does a really good job of creating that kind of parity with live coverage, in the sense that it feels like they're being fed real-time information. And so props to Jerm and Yuli for putting in that work.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that they've become so popular. And, you could chalk a lot of it up to the production and the Jomez's, video team and the graphics and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, people come back to Jomez and they watch the practice rounds and all that stuff because they like the personalities of the players involved. And while, I think some people have started to kind of like cool on those guys a little bit because of just kind of the wackiness sometimes, and like maybe a little too much silliness. I also think that, that creating that personality is like what has enabled them to become stars in the sport. Big Germ, without the Juma's commentary stuff, would just feel like a disc golfer who was like aging out of the sport and getting taken over by younger players. And, he obviously still has great rounds and can still show up in top 10 at tour tournaments. But he is somebody that you're like, oh, Germ, like, because he's just put in all this time and energy into being not only a great personality, but also going out, doing the job, knowing the stats and all that stuff. So, yeah. I got
What's
one
next,
for you.
Charlie? Okay.
This one comes from Marcus. It's a little back to the Ricky Paul stuff. I started watching disc golf in 2018, and that year was a lights out year for Paul, which is a year I remember as Paul being the player of the year. Who won Worlds in 2018? Greg Barsby won Worlds. I still remember an outstanding season. So yes, Worlds has value, but if even Paul demands that people think he's the best player, Ricky is a very great player also. Now that's the way I like to see an email ended. Paul is great. Ricky is great also. Everybody can agree with that.
Yes. And, we can make that argument that both are great. I think a couple of things, like, yes, people are going to remember Ricky. They're going to remember his great seasons. They will look back, and when they think about Ricky, will think about his 5-win season. But when it's the way that we talk about, and there's some other emails that I'd like to discuss a little bit further. I want to do a little bit breakdown of things like field strength for wins, how heavily we consider majors, and I really want to evaluate holistically, like, how important were the wins that each player had, and kind of compare that across against each other. But that's for next week, and I have another email that I think goes along with that really well next week. But the point is, both are great players. Both have had great seasons. Lots of people on tour right now are great players who have had great seasons. I think the argument that we're making and have talked about is the way that disc golf writes its collective history and how we talk and think about those players. I think of, like, and it's not perfectly analogous because Ricky does have 2 world championships, but I think of like Charles Barkley. What's the first thing that you like joke about Barkley in the NBA? No rings, right? Like, great player, no rings. That is how he is now written into the history of NBA. I think the same way if Ricky doesn't get more majors, he's going to be the guy who had really good seasons and was always at the top, but couldn't compete at the highest level when it mattered the most and the pressure was the highest. That's just how he's going to get written in. And the great player will always be something that we know, but it's not going to be the part that is focused on and spotlighted in disc golf's collective history.
Ricky is fourth all time in majors. But obviously hasn't won in like 5+ years. Is he playing better disc golf now than he was when he won his 2 worlds? Or do you think he's playing worse?
I think that he is playing better disc golf on the whole the past 2 seasons, but there is something about his mental game that is not there at the majors. Like Ricky, and it's so weird because it feels, I mean, we've talked about this, right? In his interviews, in his posts, he has so thoroughly convinced of the importance of consistency over the biggest events of the sport, and there is clear the pressure that he has at Worlds. Remember the fence incident where he lays his head down on the fence after missing the eagle putt. There is something in Ricky's mental game right now that is creating a block and a pressure for him at winning Worlds and at winning majors now that wasn't there 5 years ago. And I don't know what it is, but his skills are better than ever before. Ricky is a better player than he ever was before.
Right.
He's got a more well-rounded backhand game to go and complement the always strong, powerful forehand. He's still putting great. He is a better player, but it's clear that his mental game is not at the level that it was when he won his majors those years ago.
I'm always wary of because, I mean, it's part of the sport, you got to show up and you got to play well for majors, but it's also a small sample because we only have, this year we had 4, but in years past we've had 2 or 3. And so, you have these years where there's basically no majors. In 2020, we only had 1, right? We just had USDGC because of COVID stuff. So there haven't been as many opportunities, but it does feel like something goes wrong for Ricky every time at the majors. Either he's out of it the whole time, or at USDGC, he's in it and then he blows it. And it's not that he's overall susceptible to pressure, because look what he just did at the Tour Championship.
Right.
He makes 4 incredible shots in a row. You could call it 6 with the putts.
Call it 6. Yeah.
On hole 18 to win the tournament under ultra pressure, coming from behind. So it's not that he's not capable of winning big tournaments. Obviously he is. He won more than anybody this year. But there is something about that, makes you wonder, maybe it's time to talk to a sports psychologist.
Right.
Try to get to the bottom of the issues you're having at specific events. But then again, it could also just be that it's random. It could be that it's a little bit random. But, for him to dominate, to be so good at Nevin, why isn't he doing that at Champions Cup? Why are we not seeing him with a great forehand be consistently successful at Winthrop? There's nothing in his game that explains him not winning a major for 5 years, because over that time, it is a big sample. It's, whatever it is, 12 events or something.
But not only is it a bigger sample, but I think you can, let's say Calvin, for example. If you want to, I think Calvin has his own problems. We've talked about them before. But let's say you want to say Calvin just hasn't had the consistency of 4 majors a year. And if we had 4 majors a year for the past 3 years, then Calvin would have had a major by now. Okay, that's a legitimate argument, right? Make that argument for Ricky. That's fine. You know who you don't have to make that argument for, though? Macbeth, right? And that's the problem. We're not talking about Ricky in a vacuum. We're talking about Ricky in comparison, because he is always, for the longest time, it was, we still talk about it, the Ricky Paul, right? It was the foil to the GOAT, who is dominated the sport for the past decade, and there have been flashes of other players who challenge that dominance. The problem is though, is that over the past 5 years, you can explain away with whatever you want why Ricky's not winning majors, but the problem is that none of it applies to Paul because he kept winning majors. So if you want to blame COVID, Paul didn't care and he won majors anyway. You want to blame the lack of majors, Paul didn't care, he won majors anyway. You want to blame injury, Paul's had injury and had to come back from a pretty severe ankle injury in order to get it as well. I don't think it's quite the same as like Lyme disease. I've never had Lyme disease, so I can't speak to that. That is maybe, but it doesn't make sense why Lyme disease would allow Ricky to win 5 events this year, but not a major. Like, I don't think Lyme is that selective. So I just don't, any explanation or rationalization that you build for Ricky doesn't matter because Paul kept winning. And that's the problem with this discussion. It's not that Ricky's not a good player. It's not that Ricky's not having great seasons. It's that while Ricky is still continuing to take down 4 or 5 Elite Series and win Player of the Year, Paul is going for the most majors in the history of the sport, a record that may never be touched again. And Ricky's being left in the dust in that category.
I propose that this topic be laid to rest. Until next year, I don't know what more there is to be said about this. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk to Ricky in the offseason. Always love doing an offseason interview with him because I want to hear his thoughts on this topic. You know, candidly, like going to press and be like, hey, what's going on? Why are you, what's different about the majors? And, you know, maybe he'll have some insightful things to say about it because I think he might.
Yeah. So before we move on, I have one more email that I want to read.
Great.
And then we can lay it to rest because I think that this highlights my argument well. So I want to read it. But I think it's a really well articulated email. And this comes from Mike. And what I want to add is I think that this doesn't apply to like European soccer leagues who do just crown a champion based on performance over season, and they don't have a championship event of any kind for individual like national leagues, so like the Premier League, for example. However, things like Champions League do have a championship format. So here's what he writes. Regardless if it's a team sport, individual, if it's head-to-head format or solo competition, we crown those as best when they perform at the time the stress and the pressure are at their highest. Whatever the format, whether that be playoffs, championships, majors, qualifiers, what have you, those are the times when we agree it matters most. It's that collective agreement that gives any credence to world prestige or legacy. That's what we're testing in professional sports. How can you stand up to the largest pressures that the competition throw at you and still perform? When the pressure is at its peak, are you still the best player in the room, the course, or the world? And can you stand up to that pressure repeatedly, or do you shrink at the biggest moments? If you can't be the best at the moment you want it most, you're not the best. It really isn't more complicated than that. There's a reason many players struggle when they make league card. No different reason when Ricky struggles at disc golf's most important events. Conversely, there's a reason that Paul doesn't. There's a reason Paul gets better at the most important of tournaments, and it's that type of consistency that makes a player the best in their respective sport.
Great email.
Great email. I appreciate the articulate, thought out nature of this email. I think it's one of the best takes, and I on this subject, regardless of what side you're on, and I think it is very well written. So that's what I wanted to leave it with, and then I'm happy to retire it till the off season.
All right. I got an email here from Aaron, who's given us some stats and info about the Tour Championship. 12 players took home their biggest ever payday at the Tour Championship. Kristen Tatar, Owen Scoggins, Valerie Mondahano, Ella Hansen, Bria Oliva, Kat Murch, Ricky, Isaac Robinson, Joel Freeman, Ezra Aderhold, Brody Smith, and Thomas Gilbert.
It's a lot
That's
of players.
Pretty nice. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, and people who were knocked out in the quarterfinals took home their biggest paycheck, right? We're not even talking about finalists or semifinalists. We're all the way down the board. People are taking home very large paychecks. And I think that just goes to show you how important this event is to people, right? When people say that their season goal is to make the Pro Tour Championships, it's because there is meaningful paydays for them. Think back to, I think it was Casey White that we talked about when he had a strong performance, and I want to say Jonesboro, and the first time we interviewed Casey White, he's like, yeah, that couple $1,000 is the reason that I get to stay on the road for the next month, and I don't need to go home and work for a couple months before I can go back out. Like that's how much these sums of money mean to lower tier players who are not winning week in, week out, or have the large, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth in contracts every year.
Yep. Kristen tripled her career earnings this year. So $42,000 coming into this season, and earned $103,000 this year in 2022. Yeah, some crazy stats here. Her 2022 season earnings at tournaments is more than Juliana Korver's earnings coming into 2022 total. Juliana's first event was in 1995. That was her first cash. Owen Scoggins doubled her career earnings this year. 14 players earned at least $20,000 in tournament winnings.
That's a crazy stat.
Yes. Valerie Jenkins' career best year in 2008, when she won 17 of 25 FPO events, was 17,742. You think about the progress that has been made, and there's a reason that there's a higher depth on the FPO tour now. And it's not just that more people are playing. It's also that more people can make enough money to at least subsist on the road. Paige Pierce's record-breaking 2017 season, where she won $41,000, a little more than that, it stood as the record for 4 years. It's now 12th in all-time season earnings in FPO. How about that?
Those are some wild stats. And that's the thing that we've talked about. These stats, they're going to get blown out of the water next season. As long as these purses continue to rise, I just feel like these numbers are going to continue to change every season and just become completely irrelevant.
How long do you think Kristen's earnings record will hold up in FPO?
I think it holds as long as Paige's did.
Yeah,
I'm going to say 4 years.
Right. I'm going to say 3, but I think it's not going to be next season, because it's hard to play as well as she did and win that much. And I think it's only going to get harder as we move forward. It's the same trend we've seen in MPO.
Yeah.
It's not going to be forever that we have 2 players winning the 75% of the events.
Right. The other problem that you have on the FPO side is that right now, the way added cash is going into FPO is in higher winner payouts in order to try and match or get closer to parity with the MPO side. And so you see a drop off from FPO number 1 to number 2 and then down the board faster than on the MPO side. And so it's like, MPO, you could take a lot of second place and third places and win the Pro Tour Championship and then Ledgestone, and you do those things, and that may be enough to get to that record within even next year as payouts continue to increase. FPO, that's not going to be the case though, because a lot of that money is done to prop up the winner and increase the winner's salary or payout, and doesn't do so necessarily down the board in the same equitable way, which means you have to win like Kristen in order to beat Kristen. And that's a very difficult task.
Yeah, they also tend to pay out deeper, which means you have to pull more money down the board too.
Right.
So it kind of thins out that top end a little bit outside of the number 1. And, we see different tournaments take different approaches to that, but pretty interesting. Aaron follows up with, I'm curious about your thoughts on the future of FPO, the viability of players being able to tour, and what the sport looks like in a couple of years. How many more spots will be needed for FPO next year? How many more new faces will look to jump on tour? How will that impact playing on the same course on the same day as MPO? And how does DGN continue to broadcast tournaments? I think there could be some logistical questions, he says, as FPO continues to grow. I think that's probably true. But I also think that just in general, it feels to me like the whole sport is almost a little bit out in front of its skis right now, where yes, more players are going to go on tour next year. Yes, the competitiveness as FPO is going to continue to increase, but it's not like we're going to see the size of the tour double. And it's not like 14 players made 20K in earnings at tournaments. That's great money. But, tax man's coming for a lot of that. Self-employment tax, 1099. You got all of the expenses of being on the road. I just talked to a player agent who thinks that just the cost of going on tour, just to be on tour, is sort of in a minimal sense, is $30,000 a year. And it sounds about right, doesn't it? Like, if you think about your own personal costs of like having a house and food and just all of the things that you do, it's probably more than $30,000. So if you minimize some of those expenses, but you can't eliminate them, right? You still have to eat, you still have to have somewhere to live, and if you're going to be driving around, you have to pay for gasoline. So it's not like it's just like, oh my God, there's so much money to be made, everybody's going to be flooding the tour. I think it's going to be a steady, consistent 10 to 20% step. Now that adds up over time, but I don't necessarily think that all of a sudden we're going to have a huge problem next year with, FPO getting way too big.
Here's the other thing. The influx of new FPO players who are competitive in that division, Holland Hanley, Ella Hansen, Emily Beach, name the list, right? People who are new to the sport, was precipitated by COVID and drove a lot of very competitive athletes who didn't have other alternatives during COVID into disc golf. That's not the case anymore, which means the kind of people you're going to have, number one, you're going to have female players who come up through the junior divisions, which you always get one or two new of those people who probably could be competitive pretty early. Think Valerie Montejano.
Aria Castrita. I mean, it's
Aria Castrita. Perfect. Mm-hmm. Right. That's going to continue to happen every year, but it's not going to be, in droves, because the high school girls age or college girls age competition is not that robust. It's a smaller percentage. It's a very small percentage of the overall disc golf demographics. We've talked about this. The second thing you could have is you could have athletes who come over from other sports in order to play disc golf.
Venus Williams, let's go.
Venus Williams. Without a catalyst event, though, the reason for females to do that, though, are decreased, especially as we've talked about, Charlie. I mean, the big money is not there for most of the FPO players. So maybe you get
the big money's not there for most of the MPO players either. Right. Just like so everybody keeps that in mind. Like,
yes,
it's not like you just show up on tour and start winning a bunch of money. Like, you have to be really good. Like, let's take Brody Smith as an example. Okay, let me just pop over to Brody Smith's page, because Brody is a top 25 player on the planet right now, and he has grinded to get to this point. And he's not coming close to winning events, but he's a very good player. He's a solid professional disc golfer. This year, let me see if he has the. It doesn't include his Pro Tour Championship stats. So I have to do a little math. Hang on. How much did Brody get at the Tour Championship? He lost in the first round.
Lost in quarters. So what? 3,500.
Okay, so sure, 3,500. So total, he made just shy of $18,000 this year in earnings. Now, look, that's a nice amount of money. Like, most of us playing disc golf would love to make $18,000 playing disc golf. But on the other hand, that's not very much money.
Wouldn't trade that for my job.
Like, if he didn't sell a lot of Frisbees and like have a YouTube channel, like, he probably wouldn't be doing this.
Right.
And like, at the end of the day, a lot of these players are essentially affiliate marketers for discs. And they get to make money if you buy their discs. And that's how that's working. So you either got to be great or you got to be famous. That's it. But sorry to digress. I just want to make sure that it's super clear that, like, even if you're a top 25 player in the world, you're not making enough money from tournaments to really move the needle.
Do you know the phrase summer sales, right? That's like, is that like a nationally in Idaho, it's a really popular thing where recently graduated high schoolers go and work for door-to-door sales companies and for the summer, and they make like 35-40K, and then they don't work while they're in school. I don't know if that's like a national phenomenon, but Idaho and Utah all the time. all the time.
Is this a thing like in the Mormon community? Because like that is definitely not a thing in New York.
Okay, I think it is, and the reason why is because in order to go on a mission, you had to be 19 before. And so you had a year in between high school and your mission. And a lot of people didn't want to just go do 1 year of college and then go on their mission. And so I think they would go do these like 1 year employments where you can make pretty decent money.
Bank some money.
Right. You can bank some money, but it really sucks because you're just like knocking doors, selling pest control, right? Like I'm telling you, this is, if I went right now and just like pulled 5 people near my age off the street, I bet you 3 out of the 5 of them have done summer sales. Like,
okay, so it's a huge phenomenon.
Huge phenomenon. All sorts of people do it. Okay, so now I just now think of disc golf as being the ultimate summer sales, where people just get in a van over the summer and go around saying, "Let me sell you this frisbee, man. It's the best frisbee on the market."
But like, really?
Yes, it is. I want to know. Will some other people send me emails? Is this a phenomenon elsewhere? I'm not crazy, right? Like people in my area, Idaho, Utah, you've heard of this. Everything is being questioned right now in my head. So
that's a very interesting regional thing that it's definitely not something. I mean, I know about door-to-door salespeople, but it's not like a phenomenon. Yes. I definitely knew some people who got into the Cutco knives thing. You know, that's like more like scammy even.
Yeah,
than just doing general door-to-door sales.
It's pesticides and solar panels right now. Those are the two that are really big door-to-door.
Landscaping services, perhaps.
Some I don't think as much.
Solar panels.
Solar panels.
How often do the solar panels people come to your house?
I've had 2 in the past. Over this summer, I had 2.
Okay.
So, yeah, and
it's a lot more than me.
That's a lot. You don't buy solar panels for your apartment building, Charlie?
They should put solar panels on the roofs of these buildings.
They should. You're just not paying for it, though.
Yeah. I mean, I'd still end up having to pay for it. Just not, they wouldn't put a bill to me directly. They just raise my rent.
Right. Anyway, so to wrap up my point on FPO is you're going to have 1 or 2 players who are legitimately competitive in like the top 20 cents, similar to like the Brody Smith levels, who come from each of these demographics. But the majority of the new players that are going to come from that method are going to be people who find themselves fighting for the scraps at the bottom. Like Aria Castorita is going to win Rookie of the Year, but where was she on the tour? Like Stacey Haas won a Silver Series, but was almost wholly uncompetitive at other events. And I really like Stacey. I think she's a great player who has a bright future in the sport. It's hard. It's getting harder to break into the pro tour.
Aria Castorita made $5,700 in earnings this year. Now, she didn't play a full tour, so.
Sure. How much did Stacey Haas make? That's.
1 second. Let me look it up for you. She made $53.35.
It's really, really hard to become a successful professional disc golfer, and it's only going to get harder. And so I expect the number of people who are coming in that are impacting the sport and impacting the tour are going to be 2 to 3 a year maximum. Like that's the high end in my opinion.
Yeah, and you think about it, though, like as the pool increases of players, the purses will also grow, and
True.
I think you're going to have it generally move in a linear sense, because what's going to happen is if you're out there on tour and you can't cut it and you're not making that money, either because you're popular or because you're good, you're going to just start to see people drop off the tour because. Why? Like, after you're 24 years old, do you really want to keep grinding it out on the road? Like, people are going to want to start a family. People are going to want to, like, have a home base to live in. And so there's still not that many opportunities to do disc golf as a profession, as a non-player. But they're getting bigger, too. So we'll see more people get into starting their own companies, getting into media, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, big money skins. You watching? You sitting it out? You going to get some popcorn and see what's going on? And 50 grand to the winner. Interesting stuff. We'll be right back.
The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Make sure you check out Pound's Custom Pack Builder, where you can customize every aspect of the bag, from the upper fabric, the lower fabric, the zippers, the sliders, the cords. You can get an Octothorpe, an Octahall, a toolbox, or even a Carlton in custom options. And stay tuned, Rufus Customs coming soon. Go to PoundDiscGolf.com to check out the Custom Pack Builder today.
Welcome back to the Upshot. Big Money Skins is happening at Eagles Crossing. The OTB Skins crew, GK Pro, working with Eagles Crossing to put together this huge sort of championship skins event. All the winners of OTB Skins during the season get an automatic invite. And then there's also sort of like open qualifying rounds that begin tomorrow, Friday, and then it will continue through the weekend. So up to 96 players will take the course tomorrow for the seeding rounds. And then 48 of them will advance to essentially round number one, or I guess you call it round two. You got to win your card or have one of the four best scores as like a wild card. 16 players will advance on to the next round. And then the winners of each of those four skins matches on those individual cards will advance to the finals to be played on Sunday. They're selling tickets. They've got food and drinks. You know, Eagles Crossing is this multi-million-dollar course that's been built from scratch. And it's all happening, but you can't watch it on YouTube. It's not going to be available as just a typical OTB Skins, Josh. It's going to be broadcasted live. So we'll talk about the broadcast part in a sec. But first of all, just like the overall concept here, Big Money Skins. Are you into it? Are you interested in this event? We have a lot of big names showing up for it.
Yeah, it's you know what, I'm just gonna be honest. No, I'm not, right? I'm not interested, and here's the problem. I think it combines and does two things that feel really like an awkward mashup to me. So number one, you have OTB Skins. OTB Skins are incredibly popular. They're not my choice of content. When I'm looking for disc golf content, it's just not what I prefer. But I understand the appeal. I think they're well done, and people really enjoy the player interaction, right? The jokes, the camaraderie, the getting to see the players, like the behind the scenes look of what players are really like when they're not competing at a tournament. And that's the appeal of an OTB Skins match and why people like it. It's not about the money. It's about people are having fun, and the money is there in order to put some sort of stakes so that people take it seriously and they want to watch people throw cool shots. You then combine it with a large purse, the big money attitude of like the 50 grand goes to the winner, and then you charge $15 in order to watch it. But the problem is that players aren't going to take, like, there's going to be no joking around behind the scenes fun of the OTB Skins because there's 50 grand on the line. Like, I think people are going to take it really seriously. And so given that kind of like the mashup, I understand why some people would like it. Like, I can logically understand the appeal of this. I just have almost zero interest in watching this. And I've tried to like manufacture some excitement about it for myself. I just can't do it. I have very little interest in watching this event this year.
It's something about it feels a little all forced.
Yeah.
That's the issue that I have with it. It's like we're forcing prestige with this big purse. But like, to me, when somebody wins a big purse, I have a similar issue with the Pro Tour Championship. I really do. And it's that the non-stroke play nature of the event just makes it a sort of less compelling story to me. And, you know, why is that? Is it because of the tradition of typical stroke play in golf? Is it because, you know, skins can feel a little fluky? But just something about it just doesn't feel totally like a genuinely exciting. Like someone's going to win $50,000 and it's going to be like, wow, that's cool. That's great. It's like when there was that like ace contest that Eric put on for 25 grand and Matt Dollar hit the ace and they're all going crazy. And it's like, oh, that's cool, man. You won 25 grand. But like, it has no stakes. It has no weight.
Sure.
That's how I feel about this. There's no weight. But all that said, I'm very interested in the media component here because, as you said, they're charging $14.99, livediscgolf.net, and they're spending into the six figures to produce this live stream.
Yep.
And that is very interesting because I want to see what it looks like when an outside production company that has experience doing live broadcasts, that is running fiber, that is setting up a mesh network on the property, that is going to be trying to bring the cameras into the truck at the best possible quality. You know, like this is like an OB truck. This is how a professional golf broadcast would work. Now, obviously on a much smaller scale. They're spending many millions of dollars on a PGA Tour broadcast. Here they're spending, I don't know, $150,000, $200,000 or something. Mm-hmm. But I don't think you can complain about the money that it costs to watch this because they're spending so much money to put this broadcast on. Now, you know, whether people are going to be willing to pay $15 to watch, well, that's another story. But I am very curious to see what it ends up looking like. Because in my opinion, it's not just about getting the quality cameras into the truck. They're using a satellite truck to distribute. So they're going to have the best possible signal chain so that you're going to be able to see in theory, very high quality footage. You know, you're going to be seeing pure 1080 HD. Like there's still some compression if you're watching online, but like it should look better in theory than what we see on DGN, which is kind of getting rinsed through going from the cameras over the internet and then back down to the internet onto the servers and then back through the internet again. So like all this stuff is getting rinsed. And so that's why you lose some of the nice picture quality when you watch DGN. So in theory, this should be sharper than that. But that is not what a broadcast is all about. That is not what a broadcast is all about. That is one small component. But really what a broadcast is about is, can you effectively direct and produce the show in a way that makes it fun and interesting to watch, that has good graphics, that has nice use of replay to watch great shots again, to time shift the broadcast. And that is hard. And that is where I wonder whether this will work out. Because if you have an outside production team that's never done a disc golf broadcast before and is not experienced necessarily in golf, that's a tough ask. It's a really tough ask. And, their directors are not experienced disc golfers. They're going to have guys from GK Pro in the truck to help them produce, but it's just a different beast. This is not post-production. And I think what's going to end up happening is that it's probably going to look like post-production that's being aired live with a lot of shots from the lead card and then old school people walking around. Now, I'd love to be proven wrong, but I just think that people are going to look at this and be like, wow, this is worse than DGN, even though it looks nicer. And that's because it's hard to do all of the other things that make a broadcast what it is. So that's just it's kind of like a media nerd side interest for me.
How many people do you think buy this pay-per-view? It's $15.
I mean, I think that it would be successful if they got like 1,500.
That's kind of the number I've got in my head too. Yeah.
It's a high bar, and it's also just a tournament that, like, if you went out and you asked a random person, like, hey, you hear about Big Money Skins? Like a disc golf person, they're gonna be like, no, what is that? I don't think this is like a broad consciousness event.
Yeah, it isn't. And here's one thing I'm gonna say. So they have a website, bigmoneyskins.com. You can find the event summary and schedule. I hate this website. Like, I'm looking at this schedule and like, it is not intuitive at all. Like
the schedule, I've already tried to parse the schedule. I really don't
and like,
quite understand how it all works.
If man, it's just I feel like they have set themselves up for just the most like there's a risk of just the most spectacular failure. And I hope I'm wrong, but I look at this website and I go, ugh, this is bad. Like, I go to media because I'm curious about like the media side, and all that's there is just a YouTube video. And I'm like, huh? Where? But sorry, I don't understand.
We'll see.
So, I don't know. But here's my thoughts, like my kind of my final thoughts on this whole thing. If it goes spectacularly well, then I think it's going to be an amazing exercise in the future of live coverage and the use of production crews and what disc golf should be, right? Option number 2, it's going to go spectacularly bad and it's never going to be held again, at least pay-per-view, because nobody will ever pay another $1 because of how bad it was. The more likely option, I think we're going to see some things that we go, oh, that's really nice. This like, the coverage is really nice. The quality is really nice, whatever, right? Like there are a couple features that we like about it, but on whole, I don't know if I would pay $15 again for it. That's a nice lesson for next year.
That's a good
Let's move
bet.
on.
That's a good bet.
That's the, if I had to put my $15 somewhere, I think that's going to be 90% of.
I would place it on a bet that will be the.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Josh, I do have an over-under for you about this tournament.
Okay.
I set the number. Over under 1,500 people buy this PPV.
Now
we may never get this number, but
we may never get this number.
In case we do.
I'm going to take the under. Like, I honestly didn't even hear, like, Charlie, you and I are pretty well connected to the disc golf world and disc golf news.
We're tapped in. I didn't hear about this until like 2-3 weeks ago. I had a solid understanding of like, oh, this is happening and this is what it is. Like, I'd heard whisperings of it, but like it wasn't really until like, I think the Eagle announcement that I was like, oh yeah, like big money skins are a thing. I need to go look at that. Like, I'm a little cool on the idea that Eagle is coming to this. I thought we just got the whole thing about how he's like trying to like rehab for next season.
Said he felt great and has not worried about injury.
That's just weird to me because like
you skip USDGC and go to this. Yeah. I
mean, they're probably paying him to come out.
Oh,
I mean, they have there's certainly a track record of Eagles Crossing paying pros to come do things there. I mean, they've had these big money skins matches there before where players are getting a significant appearance fee, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, and they want pros there. Macbeth's not going, but like a lot of other top players are going to this.
Yeah.
So you're saying you're taking the under?
Yeah, I'm going to take the under.
All right. Well, if you want to check it out, folks, bigmoneyskins.com, livediscgolf.net. We'll keep an eye on things and we'll talk about it next week. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I'm already looking forward to some off-season shows to come soon and starting to think about our roundtables for the holidays. Let us know if you have thoughts on what you'd like to see in the roundtables or anything in this off-season. Shoot us an email, upshot@ultiworld.com. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. He's Josh Mansfield. I'm Charlie Eisenhood. And we'll talk to you next week right here on The Upshot.